Hello and welcome. So we have always wanted to do, a book club within the collective analyst group, which is CAGR, an initiative that we started probably 6 months ago. The objective of CAGR, Sarthak, is uh, there are a lot of people who graduate from colleges or do accredited courses like the CFA or the CMT, and then end up in jobs in the financial sector that do not give them the roles and the responsibilities that they're actually looking for. And finance, if you put a pie to the kind of profiles that people generally get, a lot of it is KPOs, to be very frank. So we thought, why not portfolio management? Why not risk management? Why not raising capital? Why not redistribution of wealth? And then we came up with a concept where we talked to headhunters, head of teams, and some senior leadership across the industry. And we realized that it takes 9 to 12 months for the industry to train somebody to be capable enough to interact and to engage with the work that they actually want to do. And by that time, a lot of work that has come on their plate is already obsolete, or it's not something that they would want to do. So a lot of times I've got complaints from people that I cleared CFA level 2, and the work that I get is not something that I studied or is not something that a CFA is supposed to do. So then we realized that there is a gap between the industry's tangibles, and there is a gap between what the MBAs and the accreditations across the platform are going to do. And surprisingly, I also know that you've just joined a management organization that we'll be talking about, and you are the lead finance faculty over there. And I think the 6 months tenure that you are spending with students is also going to be about how they can bridge this particular gap. So that is all CAGR is all about, and we are happy that we're able to connect with an author today who has written a book on startup fundraising and different stories that he has had through his life of consulting startups for almost a decade now, if I'm not wrong. So a brief introduction of the author, Sarthak Ahuja. He is a chartered accountant, but he's a lot more than accountants are. I've generally felt accounting to be a very dry profession, but luckily I've interacted with such accountants who are very colorful, right? And Sarthak wears a different hat, probably 3-4 hats during a particular day. So he's a chartered accountant. He has 10 years of experience in startup advisory, which we've already covered. And he is a gold medalist from Indian School of Business. And he's a winner of the ISB Young Leaders Award 2017 batch. He was also the youngest Indian to have completed 4 degrees, which is CA, CS, CMA, BFIA by the age of 23. Right? So for all of us who think age is not just a number, I think he's put a milestone right there and a brick which is very difficult to achieve. So a lot of times we come across and we say if you start investing by 20, by 60 you would have nothing to worry about. And then we tell this to everybody and yet nobody invests, right? So I think in the same way what Sarthak did is he helped his degrees compound things for him. Right? So we will also come around and ask him of how he was able to do it in such quick time. He helps businesses raise funds and he also creates educational content. He has more than 1.7 K followers, 1.7 M followers on his Instagram, and he's found by @CA Sarthak Ahuja. So Sarthak, we will want you to go through your book. Sure. For 5 to 8 minutes.
Okay.
But before that, a personal question.
Sure.
What made you do all this by the time you were 23? And why? Is it required or is it necessary for someone to go ahead and have these certifications in their portfolio is the first question. And what made you achieve all these certifications by the age of 23?
So I think in terms of necessity, it's definitely not a necessity to be studying these courses, but I definitely feel they're a catalyst in your career. Now, catalyst in the form of credibility. One, you don't need to prove to someone that you know something. With a degree, at least it gives you that credibility, be it with clients, be it in the industry, with employers, or anyone that you're really interacting with, to showcase that you're an expert. Second, I think just the way these courses are structured, they just put you through so much rigor, the rigor that you're actually required to go through in your career in the future, no matter what you're doing. So I think to think that these courses or completing them is a milestone achieved, while of course it's a milestone, but it's just a stepping stone to prepare yourself for all the study that you have to do for the life ahead, regardless of whether you're in finance, marketing, growth or anything, because the half-life I feel of any career or any profession right now is literally not over 5 years, which is why let's take that as a training that you go through to become a self-learner, to understand how to learn and imbibe new knowledge in yourself and probably put it to use in the future. With respect to what prompted me to do it, I think, as they say, you can only connect the dots when you look back. So I had never thought that I want to be the youngest so and so. I mean, that was never the intention. The idea was that, okay, I signed up for CA. Immediately after school, I just took 4 entrance exams. I took the CA entrance, I took the CS entrance, CMA entrance, and one for finance undergrad from CBS, which is College of Business Studies. Happened to clear these 4, and then I had to make a choice, and decision fatigue. So you're like, we're on all of them, let's just see where this goes, let's just keep taking those exams, and whatever I enjoy doing, I'll probably double down on, and whatever is probably not working out for me, that's okay, no hard feelings. And it so happened that all of these courses had a lot of overlap. So you'd be specializing in, say, cost and management accounting in one, specializing in tax in another, corporate law in a third, and finance in a fourth. And since that happened, I was actually getting a bird's eye as well as an in-depth, earthworm's view on literally all subjects. So I think it just prepares you better to be able to pick a specialization later because you've experienced reading everything else in depth. So I think that's how it just turned out. I was just fortunate enough that only after clearing did I realize I was probably the youngest, and a few newspapers kind of covered it. So that's just being lucky, I would say.
Yeah. So the story was picked up by Business Standard and Financial Times both. So there is a reason I know you for 5 years now, and there is a reason that I admire you. And that is, I was very young when I read this poem called The Road Not Taken. And it seeped in so well that I never took a road everyone else would take. I would see a line and I would not just stand. And then I realized there is somebody who sliced through that line, did everything that is necessary on the portfolio basis, and then took the road not taken. So what it is for the young ones, what it is for a 20-year-old who thinks that he wants to become a portfolio manager in future, or let's say be the head of a venture capital fund, and starting up or starting your own business does not need all this. But it's not easy, and I'm sure your book covers it very well, that it's getting difficult day by day to start a business, or to, even in the financial landscape, we say the quickest ROI is in financial services, and we're seeing that that's not the case today. It used to be the case 5 years ago or 8 years ago. So what is it to a 20-year-old on the career perspective where you would say, I've done all this, because I'm sure you've done way more than anyone else in this room has. I've done all this, and then I took the road not taken. And I'm sure you've gone through 4 transitions during your career in the last 10 years. So what exactly is it that you would say, okay, this is the easiest way to get to what you want? Not in terms of not putting efforts or not burning your resources, but in terms of not making sure that, the time is always a limited constraint. How much can you study is a limited constraint. What kind of efforts can you put is a limited constraint. So how do they channelize all these resources in a particular way that where they want to reach is the quickest path between where they are right now?
Sure. So I think for this, I kind of think of it as, the difference between a long-term investor and a short-term investor. A short-term investor is essentially focusing on the R in the equation, which is the rate of return that you can possibly get in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and making investments based on that. A long-term investor is essentially looking at the T, or the time that I'm going to be it for the long haul. So very honestly, after having studied these courses, I realized I wasn't really enjoying any of it much. I was taking up assignments in management accounting, I was taking up assignments in tax, I fought appeals in tax cases, I did audit for some of the biggest organizations, but somehow that I wasn't enjoying it as much. And it actually reminds me of this one story where I had a friend and we were traveling in the train, and that year he had won the award for the best quizzer in the country. So there are a bunch of national quizzing competitions. He had won all of them in the country that year. I was like, how is it that you know so much about everything? And he said, for the past 8 years, earlier it was after school, then college, and then after work, I go back home and I study Wikipedia for 2 hours. So it's like, I go on the Nike page, I'm reading about Nike, and I figure out that the founder is Phil Knight. So I click on it and I'm reading about Phil Knight. And I figure out that he grew up in Oregon, so I'm reading about Oregon. And I figure that Osho Rajneesh kind of built his empire from there. So I'm reading about Osho Rajneesh, which lands me to Pune. He's done this every year for like 8 years to get him there. And I thought that was fascinating because what drove him was his curiosity to learn more. So I think the world is changing so rapidly, and change happens in an exponential fashion, especially when you also bring in technology. That earlier it's slow. Anyone from the 1500s, if he were to come into the 1700s, would say that certain things have changed, but probably not as much that it wouldn't drive him crazy. But someone who grew up in the 1900s were to come today, they just wouldn't believe what is happening. So in that exponential change, what you have to enjoy is just learning about new things. So I feel if you're in finance, if you're in investing, you're in portfolio management, you are an entrepreneur, the one thing that should be driving you is that there are so many new things happening in the world which I am curious to know about. And then after you've developed that curiosity, you need to have a system to ensure that you're learning about it every day. So my system for me is one, I think about 5 years ago I decided that I'm going to send out an email with 3 of my favorite reads from the week. So I'll probably read something on culture, on art, on technology, on business, on literature, fiction, anything. And I'm going to send those 3 articles every Sunday to a community of about 12,000, 13,000 people who are all ISB alums. So people who've studied MBA at ISB. Now, because I knew my readership was such, who was very well informed themselves, I kind of self-imposed that pressure to fetch out like good quality gems that they would appreciate and enjoy. No one asked me to do it, but it was my system to ensure. In 5 years, I haven't missed a single Sunday of sending out that email. So I think just that process helped me discover good newsletters, sign up for them, try out their content, delete whatever wasn't working for me or wasn't interesting me, and doubling down on finding more about those authors, what they're writing. So I think it's a discovery process, but it's a process. So I think the bigger picture is it's a process of learning. Today, every business is going to have embedded finance in it. And as I say, finance is more about marketing and narrative than it is about numbers. So my specialization in the MBA was marketing, because after doing all of this, I realized I can't do any business or do anything without marketing. But you need to understand numbers to be able to run a business. You need to understand tech to run a business. So today, as they say, you can be specialized in one, but that range and then developing a depth in that range of functions is all the more important.
Great. So while that's been said, I've been a subscriber to the newsletter for the last 3 years, and being in the publicly listed market space or operating in publicly listed market space, I think I go through a lot of content on a daily basis, and my team also shoves a lot of content in me. So I think the best thing is most of the things that you share are things that you've generally not gone through, right? So they're outliners and things like that. So that's another wonderful effort. So finally, while we are at it, what is the new project that you've picked up? Why going back to school? Why are you trying to train the next generation? Why do you want to create tomorrow's leaders? And why finance?
So I think when I started doing content online, through social media channels. The intention was just to give away information for free to people who want to know about it, talk about personal finance, taxation, my learnings on business. And while I did that, two most common questions in my direct messages across Instagram, LinkedIn used to be, one, can you recommend a book where we can learn about what you're talking? And the second used to be, can you help me with fundraising, or I'm trying to finance my business? And while I would keep sharing a lot of book recommendations on my social media pages, and on Instagram, I've got a highlight where probably 20, 30 books have been recommended already. I felt like for someone to go through, these were mostly Indian founders, young people in their 20s messaging me, asking for this information. So I felt for them to go through probably 20 books to get to the point, and then realizing most of those books have been written by foreign authors based out of Silicon Valley, out of the Silicon Valley experience, and the Indian experience is very different. So I felt somehow all of that information had to be compiled, distilled down, brought to the Indian context for the Indian entrepreneur. And there was not a single book that I felt which was answering those questions in the Indian context. So I think the insight on writing something or coming up with wanting to teach people about it came from the market throwing me the problem that we're unable to find this book, we're unable to find this knowledge somewhere. Can you compile it for us? And that I feel kind of became one project to just give it to people. So I started the process of putting it in a book. And when the book happened, a bunch of edtech companies, they felt that this was information they probably wanted to teach to their cohorts and their audiences. And I felt that was a good opportunity for me to convert it to a course, monetize it in one more way, build one more digital asset, and push it out to people. So that's been fun. Yeah, I think what it does is it pushes me to learn every day. If your system is to put out content every day, which is insightful, which will add value to the lives of people who are trying to build businesses, it forces you to read every day, it forces you to find those insights every day. And I'm happy to say, like now, if I were to map my daily routine, I think easily 4 hours just go into reading. So maybe 2 hours of content through newsletters, which is more on-ground, real case studies of what is happening today. And 2 hours of probably a book, which is refreshing my fundamentals, giving me more insight on the fundamentals. So is that balance? And I never thought that I would read for 4 hours. It's just this process which has put me to it. So I think when you build that process and it starts happening daily, suddenly you're just prepared for whatever change comes in the world. You will be able to build a business on it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. So with that, I think we can now relate to you more as an audience. How about we spend some time and you read one section of your book that probably is something that you say, oh, this is, it's from me, but it's magical. We all have those moments where we have done something, we've built something, we've written something, or we've said something, and we take a break and we say, kya ye maine kiya hai? So I know the book is amazing, and for someone like me who really admires what you've written in it, I think there will be something that you would also feel is to the bone. Why don't we have a section of that?
Okay, so I think one way of doing this is that I just open up a chapter and read whatever, because one fun fact, when I wrote it, the publisher was kind enough to give me a writer who would transcribe everything that I would say. So the process was every 2 days, I will block out 2 hours. So while I'm exercising or walking or jogging, I would be on a call with the writer and telling them that, okay, today I'm going to talk about how valuations happen. These are the 5 things, and I'm going to take you through the process. And luckily, the writer was a young girl who's just completed undergrad of 21, who probably did her undergrad in psychology. So I knew that I am speaking with someone who has no background in finance. And if I can explain this, break it down to fundamentals to her, and she's going to be transcribing and writing it for me, then any person who picks it up, even if it's someone who's just passed his 10th grade, will understand how this works. So with that, I think I can pick up any chapter really, but what I've done is, to do justice to the book, I'm going to start reading different parts from different sections, which probably come together, and that'll give you a bigger flavor of what the book is about. Yeah. So I'll attempt this. Probably no other book reading has been done in a way where you just flip to some random page and start talking. But okay. Sometime in January 2022, a founder approached me to guide him in raising funds for his startup. During a conversation, he made an interesting comment. Investors want to make profits, but they seem to instantly reject most of the startups that approach them. How do they understand what will work if they reject so quickly? I understood where he came from. I asked him if he knew the acceptance rate of Y Combinator. He made a close guess of 2%, and it does lie between 1.5–2%. There's an extraordinary large number of applications for every batch of the renowned accelerator. The situation is similar for all good investors. Every week, between 60 to 100 startups email any well-known VC firm with their pitch deck. Out of them, the firm may choose to meet 5 or 6 and finally invest in 1 or 2. Which gets us to think, should you search for the river first and build a dam on it? Or should you build the dam and then hope for the river to flow through? Interestingly, many founders fail because they build dams where the river is yet to arrive. And when it does, they realize a dam wasn't really needed. The Ganges has 940 dams and barrages built on it, and it still flows through to the Bay of Bengal, serving and overcoming the needs of all those obstructions. Similarly, Godavari navigates through approximately 350 large and small dams. Smaller tributaries too have these constructed on them, but they have limited ability to support or survive beyond a point. Markets are like these rivers, and startups are like dams. Large rivers support a large number of dams adequately, while smaller ones support only a limited few. Similarly, large markets can support a large number of startups without letting any of them go thirsty. In fact, it's believed that a large market can even support average ideas and teams just on the account of the total market size. Many investors give the highest weightage to the size of the market the startup serves while evaluating it. And sometimes, seemingly average execution gets handsomely funded because the market size alone guarantees return to some extent. Now, some call it a frenzy, others believe it's justified, but it can't be argued that the valuations of several startups today defy logic. But what even is this phenomenon? Let's discuss this over a cup of coffee. I often visit the Starbucks outlet in Cyber Hub Gurgaon and order a venti mocha frappuccino. The last time I visited, I paid 350 rupees for it. But coffee is consumed by different types of consumers for different purposes. A person looking to just get their morning caffeine hit would be happy with their homemade coffee. Someone accustomed to the tapri coffee served near their office would probably not pay more than 20 rupees for a cup. But someone who likes the attention and Instagram post with a cup of coffee garners them would be happy paying a premium for it. The value that they derive from this experience justifies their spending. Notice that the basic ingredients for the cup of coffee made at home, the tapri and Starbucks are the same. But what changes is the perceived value the customer obtains from these experiences. The right price of the coffee then depends on who the consumer is and what they desire. In other words, the price depends on the consumer's perspective. You know, in talking about startup valuations and finance in general, there are 3 factors which are most important, but all formal education in finance will talk only about 2. So the one not spoken about is the story or the narrative, which no one will tell you. The second, of course, is future cash flows. The third, of course, is growth. And growth is important for any company. But what separates the great from the average ones is that they draw the line between growth and growth at all costs. Many VC-funded startups have, over the years, fallen into the spiral of growing unsustainably by burning inordinate amounts of cash, only to see their customers leaving when freebies stopped. You as the founder must know how much is too much. There's no shame in raising a smaller round if it serves your purpose. It may mean that sometimes you would have to sacrifice valuation for sustainability. But if I were your advisor, I'd always encourage that approach. It's not easy being a founder. The odds when you start out are heavily stacked against you. It's said that only 1 in 10 startups succeed, but that depends on how you define success. My guess is that the actual number is much lesser. Yet, so many in our country have chosen to become entrepreneurs, and they deserve to be applauded and supported. If you are looking to raise funds, this book will help you understand the nuances of the process, save you from the pitfalls, and make the journey efficient for you. If you're not looking to go that route or are undecided, this book will help you understand the various pros and cons of external funding and let you be prepared accordingly. In this book, I've poured in everything I've learned that I will think will make a founder's job easier. If by the end you do find it useful, then do share it with someone who may need it. Thank you.
I don't know about you guys, I'm having goosebumps. So, well, speechless, thank you. So, while I was reading the book, and this is the quickest I've gone through a book. My apologies, and the problem when I go through a book is it takes me a long time. So I've promised 52 books a year to myself, and it is absolutely consuming a lot of time, so I'll have to stick with the book and not go here and there and things. But Sarthak, while you were reading, and while I was reading the book, for the first time I have felt not being needed to Google things. Whenever I've gone through other books, and trust me, this is the second year where I'm following the 52 books rule, where I'm doing 52 books in a year. Whenever I go through a book, and it could be anything, for example, prior to this, my only exposure to the startup ecosystem globally was a book a book that is being gifted to a lot of people at the Collective Analysts group, and Vijendra, I think, is creating something around it. So there were so many terms that we had to Google. There were so many things that we had to Google. There were so many episodes that we have to Google. So, for example, Facebook's first investment, or how a Russian investor comes in and gives veto to Mark Zuckerberg and while taking the majority share, and all these things. While I was going through your book, there was nothing that I felt to Google. Why is it why is it so absolutely complete, and what makes it so absolutely complete?
So I think one, of course, as I mentioned, was the fact that I got a writer who had no background, which was a blessing in disguise, and I preferred it to be that way. Second thing is, I've tried to walk the talk and follow what I preach from the perspective that the book starts not with finance. It starts with how to evaluate a startup idea, how to define a customer persona, how to figure out what problem are you solving for which customer in the market, what would be the value that you're offering, and what would be the perceived value. In any project that you do, I realize, which has any commercial significance or even not, because even not-for-profits must follow certain frameworks which are spoken about, which is identifying what is the problem you're solving for which consumer. For me, the thought process here was that the consumer is going to be any young person, could be someone right after school wanting to start up, and it could also be a chartered accountant who's saying that, okay, maybe I haven't gotten training in this vertical, but I want to learn the fundamentals to understand what skills can I develop and go deeper on to be able to serve this to my clients. So with that big target audience, I realized I'll write for the ones on one extreme end of the spectrum so that anyone can understand what is being written and take them through it. But at the same time, offer as much depth that even if an expert reads it, he feels that he's derived value out of it. So I think that has been the approach. And the same approach has been followed from pricing the book to deciding on the length of the book, the number of words per page, the heft of the book. So everything we followed a framework to define that how will it solve the consumer's problem best. And in fact, one suggestion was that why don't you build a glossary, of terms like MVP and PMF When I said if someone's reading the book, I will ensure they don't need a glossary to refer to, because anywhere they pick it up, they'll understand what has been spoken about. So I think there was a conscious effort of customer centricity, which we've really tried to build in.
Great. So I have two more questions from the book, and then we'll move off the book and we'll just discuss the startup ecosystem as it is, and try to extract something that might not have been covered in the book. Right? It's a really tough job for me because I think all that is there is in it. But the second last question I have is, Sarthak, on the preface. You mentioned that there are these things that XYZ person have said, that these are the grades that you need as a startup founder or as a startup team. And then you tossed your last word and you said something that gentleman is missing is, or has not mentioned, and you feel is important, is the ability to learn new things. And I think you also mentioned that while we were discussing on why have you written this book and what is it needed. So when we say the ability to learn new things, what exactly are you talking about, A? And B, what is the effort that you're looking for in that particular founder or in that particular key player of that particular startup, let's say?
So I think you could be an accountant, you could be a techie, you could be a medical doctor, you could basically come from any profession whatsoever. But essentially, if you're starting, say, a professional practice, you're building a new business, anything that you're doing in this world really is about solving a problem. Because you can make money only when you're solving a problem for someone, right? So the basic frameworks remain the same. Now what is happening is, and people who've gone through a formal education in CFA, CA, medical sciences, at the IITs, anywhere, will agree that what they studied there, a lot of it was relevant, and a majority was probably not relevant for what they're doing, actually in their work. Now, one major problem really comes that when you've completed your formal education and you start your first job, the first 6 to 9 months you're just figuring out what is to be done and you're learning on the job. And what people do is, as soon as their education gets over, they realize, okay, now my theoretical knowledge is over, now I learn on the job. But what you're doing is you're putting a milestone or something saying, now this phase is over and that starts. But education is all about balancing between both, because you need to understand the fundamentals and then see how you can really apply it to it. So even while you're in school or college, or you've got your CA final exams, or your CAT prep coming up, know that you will probably be able to understand that theory better when you are more in sync with how it is currently being applied in the world. So it just helps you make connections much better and understand it. Like one conscious decision I made back in school, college, all through professional courses was, I will not take academic coaching from anyone, or I will not take tuitions. Which my parents thought was a little crazy given how much I would struggle with mathematics and calculus and trigonometry and whatnot. But somehow I felt that there is so much available on the internet, so many resources, so many books, that if I genuinely make an effort to find the best source from which I can interestingly understand it, I would have trained myself to go through material, filter out what is of value and what is not, and then focused on what really helps me solve the problem, which is at that time probably score more exams, better in my exams, and later probably do better at work. So I think I consciously put myself through that training, which really helped me and taught me how to be a self-learner. So I think it essentially starts with curiosity. You just have to be curious about. Did you know that this publisher, Visor, this is the first book that Visor has done, and I'm an early backer as an investor in Visor, and what we're attempting to do is, there are so many creators and knowledge creators who are probably creating video, audio content and podcasts. How can we use AI to just pick up their video content, automatically bifurcate it into different topics, use artificial intelligence to transcribe that into text, use GPT-3 to build a good narrative and essay around it and convert it into a book. Now you can do this all using tech without any manual effort. So this book was one of the first attempts to try and automate and convert my videos and my content using technology into this. So of course you have to start with a manual process of doing it and then understand, okay, which part of the process can you automate quicker and what will become part of the second phase. So I think if you're just following new trends in the industry and you're getting excited by it, don't just stop there. Try and see how you can apply that in your everyday life and make your life easier. And I think it's just that excitement which will drive you to keep learning.
Great. So it's about short-term efforts or a near-term effort to make sure that the long-term is effortless.
Correct.
If that's
Correct.
how
It's about creating leverage.
leverage. Great. And one last question, Sarthak. And I want you to answer it in two phases. First is as a founder or as a person who is joining a founding team. I personally feel, at Define Equity, I generally tell my team, it's the company is as good as it is for me as it is for you, right? So people who come in early, people who are key responsibility takers are also like founders. They also have to juggle between multiple things, drop a couple of balls, be innovative, make a lot of mistakes and learn through the journey. Because when you found a business or when you start a business, you're looking up to a team that really understands not just their work, but also understands that they will have to make mistakes in order, they'll have to get out of their comfort zone and make mistakes. So as a founder and as key people who are joining a founding team, if they skip the book, what are they missing? First. The second part of this is as an investor, right? As an early investor, or as an investor who wants to, let's say, only invest in publicly listed businesses or non-publicly listed businesses. Trust me, I have learned so much from this book that I'm going to implement a few key points when I'm also scouting good publicly investable businesses, because investment, irrespective of what marketplace you're buying it from, should be investable, right? So what is an investor going to skip or miss out on if he's not going through the book, and what is a founder or a founder team going to miss if they're not going through the book?
So a lot of things, in life, when people tell you that you must exercise, you know it. But if someone breaks it down into a framework, saying that, just try and do 10,000 steps a day, and suddenly your mind doesn't believe the fact that something as simple and effortless as walking, but just doing 10,000 steps, which is walking about an hour and a half daily, can actually impact your physical health in a positive way. So while one part is knowing that something is doable and should be done, the other is finding a framework or an insight which makes it easy for you to do it, that you can apply. So I think this book is a culmination of probably 3-4 years of reading about how businesses are built, about how finance as an industry for early stage businesses is run. And I remember at this one point I challenged a friend. I said, name any book on startups. And I can guarantee I would have read it, because I literally just type startups and business on Amazon and Goodreads. Whatever is the book, I will ensure I download it and I read it. So after having read at least, if not more, at least 60-70 books on the subject, I felt that, and even while writing the book, we pulled out the table of contents of all those 60-70 books and said that our TOC has to include everything that is there in all these books which is relevant for the Indian founder. So one, I've attempted to create leverage for the reader, that they don't now need to go through those many books to pick insights. So these are insights from 60-70 books, and I've mentioned none of this is my own idea. It's my learnings. A lot of frameworks are recommended by other people, which I thought people can use. So one, it creates leverage for the reader. So an entrepreneur can do without this book, but as they say, either you can make mistakes or you can learn from the mistakes of others. So it'll just create leverage if you use this and build that framework. As for an investor, I feel all of those people probably know much more than me, because they're much more senior than me in the industry. They definitely have much more experience investing their own money and someone else's money. So, I'm sure over the years they've trained because they're in that position, they've delivered that return. I would hope for them that if they read it and they find even one insight which blows them away, or they say, okay, this is something which was new. I've really hoped, because while writing it, I was hoping with certain, stalwarts in my mind, thinking like, if a Dr. Ashwath Damodaran were to read it, or if a Brad Feld, who's written Venture Deals, were to read it. And Brad Feld, by the way, was kind enough to have agreed to do a foreword for this.
Yeah.
But he said that this is in the Indian context, and when you make it more international, because I don't invest in India, I want to do it for the international version. So, I feel that when stalwarts like them have evaluated it and found something of value, I think the real test will be when they say, what, I like this, I would want to give this to all portfolio companies because I want all of them to have this knowledge. So I think that's the bigger aim here, and hopefully this will serve that purpose.
Great. Fine. So enough about the book, and guys, you can order it. It's available, and I think the signed version is still
Correct.
available.
So the signed version is limited edition. It's available to order till the 9th, which is tomorrow. Because
Great.
10th I'll be signing all the books and start shipping them out. So that'll kind of get over.
And
it's at
we have a discount coupon.
correct. In fact, so the book can be ordered at. It's not on Amazon yet. We'll make it live there in about 2 weeks. But it's at shop.vyzr.in. Vyzr is WYZR, and the discount code for this group is DEFINE15, so DEFINE15, and you'll get a 15% discount. No discount has been given ever on this book, because as even a business advisor, I always tell people no discounts.
No discounts.
Just price a premium and don't leave money on the table. But Emmanuel's a good friend, and I'm so glad that we're doing this. So it's just a token. I mean, it's not meaningful, but it's a token just to show my gratitude to the group.
Great. And for those of us who know, I am crazy about collecting signed copies of books. And I have one which is The Intelligent Investor, which is not signed by Benjamin Graham, unfortunately, but is signed by Warren Buffett.
Oh, wow.
And I was in US, and I was just carrying it like you were carrying your book, and I got a buyback, like I got an offer from somebody to buy it, and he used to run a museum. Okay, and I was like, listen, I'm not giving it no matter what. So you might not know, you might not be able to grab this person ever in your life again, and that book might just become vintage and things like that. Well, I have my vintage copy there, so great. So Sarthak, moving off the theory and the practical part of it, the question that I asked you regarding investors was because we've been into the wealth maximization domain. I've been into the wealth maximization domain all my life. That's what I live and breathe throughout the day. There is a lot of buzz for nano startup investors through the startup accelerator programs, and through platforms that are saying, like let's say Kickstarter, which is, I know, not the same because there you're betting on a product. But in India, we have so many accelerators that are giving access to anybody who let's say makes 1 lakh rupee gross and says, you know what, start an SIP in a startup. Which, like, I was like, are you crazy? Like, you start SIPs in large cap businesses. What is this starting SIPs in startups? Or you take a nano micro position in a startup where the entire cap table would say a particular brand's name, but within that brand you have 100 investors or 50 investors or 20 investors. I know, according to all the orthodox or fundamental investing that we know, this is not the right way of investing. Right? I look at it as a lottery ticket. Right? You put 10 rupees and maybe you get 100, maybe you get 1,000, whatever. But what is your take on this particular ecosystem first? Because we're addressing masses. Like you said, we don't want to be consulting a venture capital fund, or we don't want to be consulting an analyst on a venture capital fund, because they have principals and they're founders, and they probably have done 120 odd deals, and we are not the ones to tell them what to be doing. But how about these investors who are lured into the accelerator program And because, see, at the end of the day, investor protection is must.
Correct.
And there is a reason why AIFs have a capping of 1 crore rupees where you cannot invest less than 1 crore. But what about these accelerator programs and people who are in the industry getting an access to, let's say, 0.0000001% of the business? Is it significant? Is it supposed to be done? How does that impact the world?
I think one, it's definitely a gamble. Purely if you were to go by statistics of successful startups also, there is definitely a confirmation bias or an information bias, purely going by the fact that we only read news stories of those who've outshined and given a performance. But if you were to look at the actual numbers, out of maybe 10,000, one really gives that phenomenal return. So the odds, if we say, are stacked against a founder, the odds are also stacked against an investor. It's just the thrill that people find in backing good teams, good markets, and good technologies. As they say, the finance industry actually makes money off of complicating something which otherwise is very simple.
Very simple.
I personally, though I'm in finance, most of my money is invested in the form of SIP in the index
funds.
I don't pick stocks because I don't have the time, nor do I have the skill. I prefer to spend my time on other things which interest me more. So fixed amount goes every month into an index fund, and that is not in a automated SIP fashion. It's in a manual fashion. Why? Because I want to put myself through that discipline of doing it every month, which is why I've chosen for it. Now when people ask me what stocks would you recommend or what companies would you recommend to invest in, I'm not an expert because I don't do it myself, so I wouldn't recommend. But of course, the finance industry will complicate it and tell you this and that and whatnot. I think there's a very simple principle called the barbell strategy of diversification. Where barbell has two extreme ends. So you use one extreme end of very safe long-term funds, which could probably be an index, that you invest 90% of your wealth in. And the 10% you take extremely risky bets, thinking that if any of my bets really, work in my favor and I'm lucky, and you can only make educated guesses here, it'll generate like extreme amounts of wealth for me. So that's actually betting, Now you can make educated guesses as horse race enthusiasts do, this horse is probably given this much return, he eats this kind of food and trains in this way, and you can do all of that, but none of that is in your control. Which is why, from an investor point of view, what making reducing the entry barrier of saying you can invest something like 5,000 rupees also, what it's doing is it's a great marketing ploy to get money out of people's hands. But for startup investing to make sense, you must invest in at least 20, assuming that there's a 5% chance of you getting a return. So at least one out of those 20, out of sheer luck, will give you the return. So now to find 20, you will actually have to go through at least 500 and then invest in 20. And then of course you must know about the industry, you must read about it, so you may give it to a professional. But that's the education part. The other is the capital part. If in your year you're making just about 10 lakh of disposable income that you can invest, that means not more than 1 lakh can go into startups. If not more than 1 lakh can go into startups and you have to divide it over 20, that means 5,000 each startup. You may not get a significant return, but you're just betting for the sake of it, and you should be okay, as it happened with the crypto boom and bust and all that. I mean, you should be okay losing it. But at least if you follow this framework of 90-10 and distributing 10 across 20, you're just diversifying it and giving yourself some comfort. But it's not in my hands, not in Emmanuel's hand, not in anyone's hands. That's probably a reason why algo trading, no matter how much people try to build an algorithm out of what can happen in the world, you can never capture everything that can happen in the universe, which will lead to a company making a return or not. Tomorrow the founder can just pass away and you've probably not built it in your model or algorithm.
So whenever somebody comes to me and discusses algos, I simply say there are infinite variables that govern the ecosystem.
Correct.
And there is no way you can put infinite variables in a mathematical equation, right? So, great. So Sarthak, a linking question to that is, so what Sarthak is trying to say, I mean, he said it as comfortably as it can be, but just to make sure, he's saying you can invest in 20 businesses and out of the power law, maybe one gives you 10x return, not more than 10x as well, right? But the problem is, we might be in the funding winter, but we're not in the startup winter. There is a new startup, there is a new business being set up every day. You might have a stat. Is there a number on how many businesses have started up in last 1 year, or let's say 2-3 years? Or
no, I think just to give you some context, in 2021 itself, the Indian startup ecosystem raised a collective amount of $42 billion. And I believe in the last year there were probably 45 new unicorns which were minted. So now you get a unicorn valuation at $1 billion valuation, but the amount of money raised is over $40 billion.
Absolutely.
So I mean, just imagine the number of startups which have gotten funded. You can just use guesstimates to see what that scale is.
So you can be a unicorn if you've shredded 25% of your business at, let's say, some value, right? And absolutely. So number of startups that are so what Sarthak is trying to say is to have been betted on those 20 businesses, out of which one will give you a maximum 10x return. You'll have to go through 500 businesses, right? So those 20 businesses are also a guesswork, but to get to that educated guess, you'll have to slice through 500 pitch decks, 500 annual reports, 500 monthly MISs, and whatnot. I don't want to get technical, but maybe some of us are not capable to analyze them.
But I have something to add there. So I was reading about this one research that actually happened, which is there were two people who kind of hit their head somewhere, and it so happened that the part of the brain which controls emotion went numb. So they could biologically not feel happiness, sadness, anything at all, no emotion. Now they say that whenever you're making judgment on anything, there is one taking an objective decision basis facts, and the other is your emotion clouds your judgment, right? So researchers thought that these are the best two people to kind of now research and find out that if you were to remove emotions completely, will these people be able to take better decisions because they're purely going by facts? And what they realized was that both of these people just could not take any decision whatsoever. No decision at all, no matter how many facts you give them. And that made them realize that humans take decisions based on emotions and not facts. And we later just use facts to justify our decision to our own selves, that which is why I've done this. If this is the case, and it's biologically now proven in that research, if we were to believe it, and this is what we recommend to startups also, and which is why I said that there are 3 factors for evaluation. There's future cash flows, there's growth, but the biggest factor which no one talks about is the narrative, or the story you're willing to sell to people, which people are willing to believe. And the finance industry and money and cash having value is all based on trust and narrative and story, because that's how people take decisions. So know that eventually I may give you a framework which you may choose to absolutely disregard, because today you see a startup which 10 of your friends are putting money into, and purely out of that FOMO, you're like, they have probably done the research and they have probably followed that framework and done all of it, and you'll find all the reasons to invest because you believe in it. And most institutional investors also take decisions in the same way. Which is why when we also go raising capital for startups, we just say first close a lead investor who can write the check for 40 to 50% of your total deal size. Once you've got that person, getting all the others is so much easier, because you can say that guy's putting in money, why don't you?
Right.
So essentially we can talk about whatever. That investing decision is purely going to be on emotions. And you can see if you're a FOMO driven person or not. You can test it in simple things like, there are MBA placements, and you'll see 99% people sitting for placements, and one person would probably say, hey, you know what, it doesn't make sense to me, I'll figure out something on my own. And these are like instances in your life when you can really test that have you followed the cookie cutter approach which other 10,000, 1 million people are doing, or are you really trying to figure out something and create value yourself?
Great. So, no FOMOs for sure, like irrespective of what you're doing in life. But one thing that Sarthak critically mentioned is emotion, right? And we all, at least the CAGR ones, we know that price is equal to earning into sentiment, right? And sentiment always has two quadrants, the tangible and the emotion. And what Sarthak is talking about is that infinite PE multiple that we put, I'm not naming any businesses, but a PE multiple of 104, where the 10-year government bond yield is what, 7%. So you're technically supposed to give it a 17.77 max, but then you end up giving it what, 100 multiple. And the same goes on in the private equity space. But also what Sarthak said is institutional investors also make that mistake, right? So it does not matter if a large VC fund with infinite deep pocket has invested. For example, a lot of times people come to me and say, Ratan Tata backed this business or XYZ person backed this business. And I ask them, okay, what percentage of their net worth did they back it with? And you're willing to put all your hard-earned money into that business because some big shot has. So for example, when he was with us, Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, though his learnings stay, and they're like, Rakesh Jhunjhunwala ji invested X money in it. And then I asked them, what is the percentage of his net worth that is, and it's not even 1% most of the times. So, FOMO drives valuations, and I think as an intelligent investor or as an aware investor, you should stay away from FOMO. Switching gears and moving to the founder side of this. Sarthak, how does a founder know that he should not go for external funding? Right? There is a community, there are a community of experts, including you and me, who help founders raise money, outside money and capital and all those things. But if you go to a doctor and you say, do I need a doctor? I'm sure he's going to find some goddamn reason for why you need to get admitted into the hospital. Right? But like you said, simplifying things is what is your job, and I think what we have also tried to do through CAGR and our effort of investor awareness and education is to simplify things, to bring down the walls of jargons, to bring down the walls of, or to create less entry barrier for outsiders to come in and play on this field. Because I'm sure it's not been easy for us. Like we have found our own way, but it's taken you 10 years, it's taken me 8 years, and we're still figuring out what next. And I'm sure you've written this book so that the next person in line does not take 10 years. We started CAGR so that the next person in line does not take 9 years and probably takes 9 months, or in your case, I think it will take 28 hours to finish this book and then summarize it, and all would take 48 hours. So 50 hours of experience of this book is gonna probably bridge the man to a pseudo level where you've spent 10 years in the industry. So as a founder, what is it that segregates a founder and says, I should not be raising capital first? Second is, and if they finally decide that they should be raising capital, what is the right time? How? And I'm sure, they could come to you and say, hey Sarthak, this is my business. There's a rough deck that I've made for myself. You can facelift it or you can uplift it later. Tell me, should I be raising money? How do we segregate that?
This again reminds me of this one story or one research which was done, which is there were probably 20 fish of the same variety. Half of them put in, as soon as they were born, put in warmer than usual water. The other half put in colder than usual water. The fish put in warm water grew much more rapidly than the fish in the cold water. Now after some time, both fish were put in the same normal, room size temperature, normal water. And they kind of grew to the same degree, but finally they found out that the fish that grew up in warm water, that grew much more rapidly, also died 20% faster than the other fish. Which tells you that biologically, financially, it's almost like a law of nature, that faster growth comes at the cost of certain other things. It probably comes at the cost of sustainability in some cases. And this also reminds me of this rule we use in evaluating SaaS companies or software as a subscription companies, which is the rule of 40. So it says that the total of your annual growth rate and your annual profit should be at least 40. So if your profit is minus 20% because you're a loss-making entity, you should be growing at least 60% per annum for it to justify. So there is a balance you have to maintain between growth and profitability or creating value. Now, when capital is easily available, even for a founder, there's so much FOMO, because essentially what everyone is trying to do when they're building a startup, there are 7 or 8 kinds of motivations that are driving them. Either it could be money or wealth creation, or it could be I will prove it to this person and that person, probably like some estranged lover or some distant relative or something, that I can also do something in life.
Most cases, fathers.
Most cases fathers, possibly, and showing to my own family that I can do something. There could be other motivations of really wanting to add value to a particular segment of society. So your motivations can be very different. Now, as soon as you realize that capital is easily available and you can buy something quickly and raise money, suddenly in that emotion that let me take this capital and expedite this process, in a lot of cases it may not really be necessary. And I'll give you an example of, think what sector raised the maximum money in 2021. If you were to talk about across industries, so there's fintech, edtech, health tech, tech in everything. There's prop tech. Every industry now is driven by technology. The edtech industry raised the maximum money, right? And raised maximum valuations and saw so much mergers and acquisitions and whatnot. But at the same time, the 100th or the 101st unicorn of the country was Physics Wala, which is a bootstrapped entity all by itself. It reached 1 billion valuation and he raised a 100 million round and just diluted 10% of his company. And what did he really scale it to this degree with? He used content. But he did that for 8 years to get to that point of valuation and create that kind of impact. Now someone may say, I want that reach or I want that impact in 2 years, for which you will need capital to burn to get to that point. Now whether that will end up being sustainable or not is a different question altogether. So it's always a choice that can I put steroids in my body and build muscle for some macho man competition which is coming up, or do I really want to sustainably build a healthy body and work out for 5 years, train in a way that I get to that point? That's a choice that you make. I wouldn't say either is right or wrong. So it essentially comes down to that. Physics Wala is profitable, has a revenue which is more than the marketing spend of an academy, an upgrad, and all these. So like I said, there's also they say, how do you define creativity, and why is it that A.R. Rahman's music sounds so different? You would agree that when you listen to a song, the beats are slightly different. You're like, this is probably like an A.R. Rahman song because it sounds a little different. Why? Because it's learning what are the rules of music and then deciding which one do you want to consciously break and still make music. So if you were to put that constraint on yourself that without raising capital, how can I scale this? That's when you are really thinking differently than all other people and finding some leverage, and that is what will impact most in creating valuation for yourself. So, like we took the edtech example, either raise money, become unsustainable, which after a point you're just merging, acquiring, this, that, or you do it over a period of time. The choice is completely yours.
Yeah, so whenever I come across founders who are in pursuit of raising money, I tell them very bluntly, and my team always says you're too blunt on this, but I say, if you are saying that you will not run this business if you don't get external capital, you're not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur or a true entrepreneur is somebody who can still do what they would want to do without external funding, right? So I think that is what you're trying to say as well. One last perspective as a founder, and that is, Sarthak, because there are so many people like us, and because there are so many aggregators and platforms and accelerators, I think startup ecosystem everybody has just been flocked into it because it is somewhere where consultants are making a lot of money, platforms are making a lot of money, designers are making a lot of money. You hire a graphic designer for social media, they will give you a different rate. You hire a graphic designer for print media, they'll give you a different rate. And the moment you say you're gonna be working on a pitch deck, the rates would be completely different, though they're doing the same thing. So everybody's got flocked into that system because there's a lot of price premium that is coming out for services that we're providing. Because the platform is so ripe and because the ecosystem has brought in so many consultants and so many people, it is easier for a founder to find somebody who will give them what they want, right? And maybe there is no requirement of capital, but then there'll be somebody saying, oh, I can get you money, so why don't you just try and go for a raise, or why don't you just at least know? So what happens to the ecosystem when all this free money gets sucked out, which right now is the starting process, because we're not seeing successful IPOs. We have seen merchant bankers bringing non-profitable businesses into the public market, and I think that is what it is, right? At the end of the day, apart from the likes of Zerodha or some other bootstrap businesses which will never go public probably, and might convert into a trust or might convert into whatever model they want to, all these businesses have to ultimately be pushed off the bridge to the public markets. And everybody here, or our mutual funds or our broader portfolio managers will have to take a bite of it because they're a part of the index or because they're part of the smaller index and all those. When this push doesn't happen properly and when there is no wealth generation for public markets, there will be a resistance on the private markets as well, which right now we're looking forward to. What happens when founders get services easily, but it might not be the right service first, or it might not be the right thing for them?
So I think let's look at it in this fashion. When a startup raises funds, they have to make a use of funds slide, right? Like, this is the amount of money I'm raising, and this is the percentage which will go into hiring talent, into building the tech product, into marketing, brand building, etc. Now, of course, these needs vary from if you're early stage, growth stage, or later stage. But if you were to take an average, 60% of all money raised essentially goes into marketing. Yeah. Marketing can either be branding or it can be performance marketing, and there could be several other ways. Now, just think that all the money which startups are raising every single year around the world, 60% of that money is going into marketing. Who are the beneficiaries of that marketing money? If you were to try and build statistics around it and make a pie chart, you would realize a majority of that chunk is going to Amazon, Google, and Facebook. Correct? Now, if all these US stocks are down by that degree from their peaks, as a rational investor, I rather put money in these businesses, because all startups in the world are raising and paying money to these profitable enterprises which are listed. So it's also liquid as an investment in comparison, and they're making profits now. Yeah, so rationally it makes no sense to invest in startups. But if we were to learn something from the Facebook, Google, and Meta, they've actually built shovels in a gold rush. Just think of Shopify. Why is it easy for any person to start a D2C brand today? You can contract manufacture, products from any manufacturing factory. I mean, I once remember, this was years ago, so I don't know if it still happens. But I bought a pair of Reebok shoes that I really liked. And when I saw the box, it said manufactured in India by Lakhani Industries. And I was like, what? I'm paying a premium for Lakhani shoes at the end of the day, if you think about it.
Made in Faridabad.
Correct? So from that point of view, you have to build shovels in a gold rush. The reason it's easy for anyone to build a D2C startup today is because Shopify has given a platform which anyone can use and start a business. So you starting a D2C business is no value creation, but you starting a Shopify is an insight technology driven business. All this mad rush that you see and all this money that you see is going into businesses which are not as differentiated as they claim to be. So any food startup today is like organic, farm to fork, this, that. Now, if literally everyone is saying that, how is it differentiated? So I think the idea is that any startup, if investors are not understanding your insight or what you're trying to build, There could possibly be a communication problem, or there could be an insight problem that maybe you've got an insight which others are unable to see, and those kind of insights are really of most value, which is why also more important as a fundamental exercise to build a business is to build an understanding on human psychology. At the end of the day, people are going to be buying and paying money, and they have to pay money if it appeals to their emotions, and you need to find a way on solving a problem which will really feel like it's solving a problem for people and they're happy to pay you money. So I think that way psychology is also so much more important for everyone to study.
Right. So understand the business before going to a consultant is what you're saying. Or use a consultant to understand the business. Correct. Either way. Correct. And probably just don't be focused on fundraise. Fundraise should be the byproduct of everything that you're trying to do. And I think the book also says the same.
100%.
Right?
I say I make money when startups raise funds, but I would be happier if they were to find ways to fund it and grow it without raising funds. External capital, which is definitely possible.
Great. So while we are wrapping up the conversation, if anybody has any questions brewing, please make sure that after this last question of mine, you throw them to us, and it could be either of us. Hope it is for Sarthak. And for those of us who are on Zoom, if they still are, they could just write the question on the chat box, and maybe Ananya, you could read it to us, if that's all right. So Sarthak, one last thing, and that is that on the entire ecosystem is works on a lot of credibility, trust, and goodwill. We have seen startups being stuck that we would want to get funded by a particular venture capital fund. We've also seen funds being stuck, even sector agnostic funds being stuck, that we would want to invest in a particular founder. For example, we've seen founders who have burnt businesses and then started something new, and now their valuation is like amazing on day zero, right? There is a brotherhood, there is a stickiness, there is a boys band or a big table you would want to call, and maybe because of that there are a lot of potential businesses and potential talent that does not see the light of the day, right? So as a person who is an outsider, which I consider myself, I love considering myself as an outsider in any ecosystem, because that gives you the, how do I say, the motivation to keep working harder and stronger. Though someday after a couple of decades you will realize you are the one who's at the epicenter of ecosystem. A lot of people we know have done that, proven that, been there. So what happens to somebody who is not in the ecosystem? Let it be a founder, let it be a new investor, let it be anybody, but wants to play the big game. How do they get the right things at the right time?
I think I'm distilling your question down to understanding that it's about anyone who's not in the thick of things.
Yes.
How can they create something of value, correct? So I think value comes from just understanding, solving a problem, right? Now solving a problem is of two types. Either you solve an existing problem with a 10x solution. So it's either 10 times more efficient, 10 times more faster, or 10 times cheaper to do it than an existing solution. Either that, or you figure out something which is an innate need that humans have also not realized that they want. The second type is actually better and creates more value than solving an existing problem in a 10x way. But the second type is also more difficult to identify. Now, how do you build a process of finding these problems is through reading more about what is happening in technology, which is not limiting your reading to only your country and their news. So I think just building a system that you are reading about what is happening in Tel Aviv, to what is happening in Silicon Valley, to what is happening in Dhaka, and what is happening in Manila, and just exposing yourself to good information helps you recognize trends. So as finance is also about identifying patterns, it's about using your knowledge from one domain and trying to apply it to another, and trying and see, is there a pattern that I can feel is emerging, and if no one else has identified that pattern, can you really build a dam on that river and monetize it. So I think it's all just a game of learning from one function and putting to another. There is this book by this gentleman called David Epstein, if I'm pronouncing his second name correct. It's called Range. It's essentially about, everyone's been taught that you need to be a specialist. And only when you're in the top 1% to 2% you make massive wealth. But if you think about it, there are fewer people in the world who will be 85-90% on 5 things. Because to find those people who are 90% on 5 things is much more difficult to find that person who's 98-99% on one thing. And those people who are 90% on 5 things actually understand a full range of body of knowledge which can collectively be used, summarized, interconnected to solve a problem better and create wealth. So I think eventually it just comes to curiosity and building a system to learn.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarthak. Any questions from the room or any questions that there are on Zoom? Let's give an opportunity to the people who are here first. Any questions, guys? Anyone? Yeah, please. It's okay.
So first of all, thank you, Emmanuel, for inviting me for this wonderful the conversation we are having. My question to Sarthak is that now India is growing in terms of startups. It's really growing. That as you already said that last year in 2021 more than $40 billion has been fundraised, and we are coming with a new amazing idea from every corner of India. So are we really trained enough to handle the startup and fundraising? And if not, what need to be done on a macro level for the finance people to become the backbone for the startups, so that they can become the torch handler for the people who are running the startup?
So I'm assuming that the question is more directed towards what a professional who's in probably like a chartered accountant or a finance professional can do to be part of the VC ecosystem and enable it and make money and upskill themselves.
Right, and they can really help the people who are really startup, because the people with the background, they have the idea, but to bring it on the fundraising, they need lots of support from the finance team. So what need to be done for the finance people so that they are trained enough and they can really handhold the people who are?
I think one, depending on just your formal education will not help, because most formal education, and I'd like to give this example from a personal finance perspective, that if you've studied the CA course, the CS course, the CFA I don't know, I haven't studied, but if you've studied any course in finance, personal finance is a topic which is not formally taught as a subject. And also a lot of the personal finance frameworks that people learn about and try to replicate and advise people on may not really apply to the Indian context also. For example, it's said that from a monetary perspective, it's much better financially on paper to live in a rented house than to invest money in buying a property, because the capital gains over the years will not match the gains you can get in probably like the equity markets or some other avenue. But you have to realize that if a person is constantly feeling the pressure and goes into depression, not being able to prove to his family and relatives that I don't have a house, he's probably not making enough money, or he's not, or the wife is upset that we don't have a house of our own, or the children are feeling shame in probably admitting it. I feel in that case, there are certain decisions in life which you have to disassociate from finances and look at what will give you happiness in life, because you could make millions of dollars, but if you're not happy in your life, it's probably not worth it. So there are people who are also building frameworks to say how much money should you make and how should you spend it, so that you've maxed out your spend and maxed out happiness by the time you retire, and you don't leave it for future generations, because you're putting in the effort and let them put in their own effort. So there are these new topics in personal finance which I've also not figured out from any formal education, but my own reading. And if it's for the startup ecosystem, I think this book is probably one of the easiest starting points, and that's been the intention here. So be it a professional, be it a founder, be it a student, I think this will give value to, has been my attempt to everyone.
Great. Also to bridge that, see, we already have a case study, or we already have something to look up to. For example, China. When the China startup ecosystem happened, I think 10, 12 years ago, and what's happening in India already happened in China 12 years ago. We saw Sequoia opening an office in Shanghai. We saw all big VC funds in US sending their top brats, sending their top management to China, and they funded everything that the Chinese entrepreneurs wanted to start. Because of the ecosystem there, because it's not an open ecosystem, they were not able to make the best. For example, a lot of us have heard about the case study where Alibaba exit happened, and if they would have not exited, a US VC fund would not have exited. They would have a 6-7x worth of valuation. So in India also, we're looking at a lot of foreign capital coming in. We have Sequoia India as one of the largest books that are there, and Sarthak has worked across a startup that has got backed by Sequoia India. So there are a lot of foreign participants, including the legal teams, including consultants, including accounting teams. We will see a lot of Singapore-based lawyers practicing in India because a lot of startups want, or a lot of investors want their legal battles to be fought in Singapore. All very technical and all those things. But to answer that question, I think what I would want to add to what Sarthak just completed is, it's not just us. The world is looking at us right now, and the world is dependent on us. See, the kind of maximization that can happen in India cannot happen anywhere else. There are very few economies that are positioned the way India is positioned today. Let it be GDP growth rate, let it be the resources that we have, let it be the political stability, whatever you want to call it. But all those infinite variables summoned down to one pinpoint is there is nothing else like India is right now, at least for the next 10, 15 years, right? And the entire world of consultants and lawyers and accountants and startup funders and all those are focusing here. So what we can do is we can learn from them as quickly as we can, right? And give them the due credit, of course, right? Probably like Sarthak, if you go through Sarthak's book and if you go through references, and trust me, if you read this book and if you read everything that covers the references part of it, it's a PhD in itself on the Indian startup ecosystem, to be very frank, right? So if you just cover that particular perspective of how they look at, because they have burned their hands, they've invested in startups like where we are sitting right now and probably burned their hands. And SoftBank has done whatever it wants to do, Sequoia has done whatever it wants to do, all these big funds have done whatever they want to do. And now they're sitting in a way more mature position than we as India collectively are, right? And if we learn from them, and if we don't repeat the mistakes that they've made, like Sarthak started the conversation by saying, there are two ways, you make your own mistakes or you learn from someone else's mistakes. So I think one way of making sure the platform is mature for Indian startups or Indian entrepreneurs is by making sure that Sarthak, Emmanuel, Vijay, everyone else who is not a founder but is helping a founder. So we said there are technology businesses and there are technology enabled businesses. So either we found a business, either we start a business, or we enable other businesses start, right? So we should be mature enough, we should be disciplined enough, and we should know everything that has happened in China, let's say, or in US as it. So US happened 20 years before us. China happened 10, 12 years before us. So if we can just study these micro ecosystems and try to bring it to India like Sarthak has done with this book, I think that solves a lot of what we can upgrade us to, right? So that's what I think. But great. Any other questions? Yeah, please.
So it's about the book actually. So during the process of writing the book, what did you find that was the most, the best thing about the process of the writing of the book, and the most frustrating thing about the process of writing the book?
I think that was okay. Let me try and think about it because it's a good question. I think the best thing probably has to be that we tried to put a framework to everything. Like we tried to put a process to everything. TOC was looking at 60 books, ensuring that everything is covered. The system was every 2 days, 2 hours, while I'm exercising, I'm just talking to someone who doesn't understand finance, who's transcribing it, who's writing it, the editor is going through it. Then thinking about, the cover, being like, okay, what should the cover or the design signify in the minds of the consumer? It should make them look smart. even if they read just 10 pages and they derive value, but they should carry it because it makes them look smart among other people. You know, and I think we've done it in record time. The process started 4 months ago. In 4 months, we were like, we have to follow these tuck things and push it out. So the process was very fulfilling, and now we feel we're trying to automate a lot of that process and replicate this much faster for other knowledge creators. So that's been fulfilling. The frustrating part, as a person, I normally don't get very frustrated, so I don't think I was frustrated by anything. It was a good journey. It was a short journey, and I think it's just started. So
He completed it before it gets frustrating, is what he's trying to say, right?
Correct.
So if it takes 4 months to write this book, I'm sure he had no time to get frustrated on. Right? So one good way of doing it is, yeah, just slice through. Yeah, and
but again, you know, like I say that if you're an expert at something, try measuring your knowledge base. Like try and see, okay, what do you know? Distill it down to insights. Like I was doing it initially when I started doing content, and 3 months later I had no new topics left. So I realized all my knowledge can be distilled down to just 100 insights, and that's it. So anyone can learn just those 100 insights and today replace me in the industry. But as they say, you know, to do any 1 unit of creation, you need to do at least 10 to 100 units of consumption to come up with that 1 unit of insight. So to say that it's taken 4 months is also underappreciating the effort which has gone in learning these things over years, and you know, readings of years and stuff, so that finally you're like, okay, now let's build this product in 4 months. But I think the insights, the knowledge, all of that effort has definitely been much longer, and it's been a group effort. These are not my thoughts, these are thoughts of some of the best brains in the world, which I've just tried to bring together in a structure.
and Indianize them.
And Indianized it.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned that startups, there are 2 ways to grow. Like you get funding and you start growing, and you build yourself up like physics founded. But marketing costs have been so exponential. Content creation cost has been so increased a lot.
Correct.
So a person who's trying to build on his own, how does he fund himself? Because it's either his pocket or he's asking someone, friends and family, to invest in the business and to market themselves. It becomes difficult for a person to continuously do it when results are not coming. Branding, marketing is a process which takes a little bit of time to give you those results.
Correct.
So in that process, usually I have seen a lot of people back out. You know, they start taking marketing as an expense rather than as an investment. So what does a founder think when he's going ahead with this kind of a marketing plan, and how long he should wait for those results? It should not be like a month and whenever he has the छोड़ के चलते हैं, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए.
Do we need that kind of marketing? Also, so okay.
So I think I will try and distill it down to what is the fundamental question here. Okay, the fundamental question I feel is probably, when will a founder find fulfillment ke now this marketing is enough, or when should I see the result for it to be justified to me that I've created value, or let enough people know about it. Which brings us to motivation. That are you building something that so many people should know and validate and clap for you when you've created value and you've raised funds at some valuation? Or are you building a business to solve a problem and make money? Now let me give you an example. There was this one gentleman that still exists called PewDiePie. I believe he's of Scandinavian origin, and he had the highest subscriber base on YouTube in the world. And every day he would just live stream himself playing games and narrating what he's doing to a camera. And he said he did that for 10 years and never missed a day. He was ill, unwell, whatever happened, he did not miss a day. He did that for 10 years and he became the most subscribed. Now suddenly, I believe probably a couple of years ago or so, T-Series just overthrew him.
Yeah.
Why? Because T-Series had so much content library, because for thousands of Indian movies, they've made songs that they have copyright to.
Yeah.
So much content you put on a platform which rewards you for longer watch time. Songs are the kind of things you can just play and keep letting it play. So automatically the type of content, 1, massive content, 2, type of content which will give you massive watch time, suddenly it blows up. Now I say, okay, just think about what is the new technology which has come out. Let's talk about GPT-3, let's talk about DALI, let's talk about OpenAI and everything that's happening there. What is another industry which has a lot of content, which has gotten disrupted recently, where something new can happen? Think about school textbooks. EdTech has gotten, has gotten everyone to just learning something from video. Now, all the publishers who have so much content from kindergarten to undergrad, postgrad, across all subjects, they have the copyright to it. And now people are not buying books because school was shut, so book sales were not happening. Even book sales when are happening are only for mandatory because people are learning online and tuition classes online. How can they disrupt? Now, we've attempted this project where what we did was we downloaded an NCERT textbook on modern Indian history. The first chapter was the decline of the Mughal Empire. It was probably 15 pages long. We said, okay, let's input this into GPT-3 and put a prompt that summarize this in 500 words because a person speaks 100 words per minute on an average. So when I'm summarizing a 15-page chapter into 500 words, I've actually got audio content for 5 minutes. Okay. Now there's this tool called Descript. It's available for free download. If you speak into that tool for 3 minutes, it catches on your diction, your pronunciation, your pauses, everything. You input those 500 word summary that GPT-3 has created into Descript and it will speak in your voice, or if you train it with Amitabh Bachchan's voice, it will speak in Amitabh Bachchan's voice. You use DALI, put in a prompt that I want the image of a Mughal emperor. You will get a Mughal emperor image free, copyright free, available for your use because it's one of its kind available. You use deepfake technology to make its lips move as the Descript software speaks out that thing. And suddenly, in less than 1 hour, you've converted a 15-page chapter into a 5-minute course video, which is more comfortable and nicer to consume for a student today, and he's getting that summary in 5 minutes. I think if one can do that for one book, a history book, probably don't start with a mathematics or chemistry, start with a theory subject, and if you can convert that in 1 day. And I've spoken about this to publishers, and I said, what if I were to convert this book for you into a video course? How much would you be willing to pay? And they do their calculation that it will take me these many man days, this much the editor will take, this is a model or some professor will come, record it at a studio, equipment cost, everything, it will probably cost me nothing less than 5 lakhs to do this. And I say, what if I create 10x value and do this for you for 50,000 rupees? He'll say, you know what, I've got 100 books, why don't you do it for me? Do I need any marketing spend for it? I mean, so you have to realize, are you building a B2C business? Are you building a B2B business? Are you doing the business for fame and value creation, or are you doing this for making money using leverage? So leverage can be of several types. There is financial leverage, there is manpower leverage, which is traditional leverage. I'm not saying it, Naval Ravikant has said it, that old types of leverage is money and manpower. New type of leverage is technology and content. So you have to first think that if using all these AI tools, we could just discuss a probable solution which can make so much money for people, in an economy without really needing external capital. It's just about thinking what problem do you want to solve, at what cost to generate massive wealth. I think that's the question. What problem are you driven towards solving? As they say, and I made a video on this last week, was tennis superstars make 20 times more money than badminton superstars. So the biggest determinant of wealth creation is what game are you playing or which industry are you a part of. So be a part of an industry where you can make massive wealth with very little effort or ROI. As we say in business, you want to increase your profits, there are 4 major levers. Either you can increase the price, or you can increase the quantity that you're selling, or you can reduce your variable cost, or you can reduce your overheads. These 4 things. But whenever a business goes through losses or not making enough profits, the first instinct of a founder is to cut overheads. But that is the maximum effort and least impact on profitability. The least effort, maximum impact is increasing price. So you first need to find a way, can I increase price? If you can't increase price, that means you're in a commoditized market, which means you need to develop new products and get into another industry where customers are willing to pay you more money. So one way of looking at the problem is पैसा नहीं है तो marketing नहीं होएगी तो पैसा नहीं बनेगा. So do we want to play the game where we are using money as leverage, or do we want to play the game where we want to use tech and content as leverage? That's a question that anyone has to answer. And if they use marketing as leverage because they're building a B2C business which takes that much money to do, then it's about, as in investing, there is a stop loss. This is what I tell everyone, that it's a never-ending game. I am advising startups at the Series A, Series B stages, and let me tell you, there are startups who will, and this is across India, across industry, every D2C founder is trying to justify that his gross margin is actually higher than it actually is. And they're trying to find creative accounting ways of moving direct costs to indirect costs, to be able to justify higher unit economics so that investors continue to fund them, saying that if he reaches scale, he will make money. But when there is so much capital, your differentiation also goes down because there is so much more competition with so much capital. Then you need to do some new types of marketing to do it, I think. And that's the question to solve where value creation will happen.
And I am absolutely anti cash burn on marketing, so I would not, don't get me started on that. Great. So if there are no other questions, there are, okay.
There's a question from our digital audience to Sarthak sir. How can a practicing company secretary help these startups apart from the compliance part, and what other avenues can be explored for the CS professional like himself?
I think the first thing that I see here is the constraint that I'm a CS professional. You are an intelligent, smart person who has to look out for solving a problem. About 5 months ago, I was at this startup summit in Surat, and it was probably the largest startup summit organized in India. There were 5,000 people in attendance. And the ground floor of that venue was a lot of exhibition stalls on startups, someone showing the EV product that they built, someone showing a D2C brand, someone showing something they built in AI. And I'm not kidding, every second founder was a chartered accountant. Now, had they thought as a CA, what can I do to be a part of this ecosystem? They are limiting themselves to, can I help with capital raising? Can I help with compliance? Can I help with paperwork? Can I help with valuations? But the moment they drop that, title of being a CA, suddenly they'll be like, okay, what is the bigger playground? Which playground should I move to? So I think the first thing is, don't think you're a techie, you're a doctor, you're a CS, you're a CA, whatever. You are an intelligent, smart person who has to learn about how the world is working and where tech is going, and just hop onto that in whatever way. So please don't limit yourself to a title or a profession.
So also when you look at the book, it does not say CA Sarthak Ahuja or CS Sarthak Ahuja.
Yeah.
It says Sarthak Ahuja, right? So unless I think you liberate yourself of these designations and decorums, you will not be able to innovate, is what Sarthak is trying to say. Great. Ananya, any relevant questions from the online?
Yes, so Sahil asked, from an investor's perspective, what makes a startup unique? It's either solution or its book of accounts or the founder's background.
I think all of it.
Yeah, I think if I were to from an investor perspective, right, what makes a founder unique?
Startup.
A startup unique, I'd say the most important thing that they look at is the market you're going after. Because you could be an okay team, an okay founder, but if you're in a great market which is going to boom, as I read about Ganges and smaller tributaries, if you're in a great market, you will make money regardless of, because there's so much money to be made, there's so much money flowing, you would find a way to deliver average products and still make money. So the first most important thing is the market you're going after. The second, people know that execution is more important than the idea. So rather than the idea that you have, you need to show spikes in your resume and in your execution abilities, as it is with applying to MBA colleges, as it is with applying to consulting companies. You need to show that you've done something, executed on something which most others have not. And that just helps build credibility. That's the second thing. And the third is, they will probably try to look at, it's not just you, it's your entire team, because one person cannot build it. So have you been able to, through your selling abilities at an early stage, attract good talent to work with you? If they see that, they'll know that before you get to the point of selling to the customer, you've been able to sell the vision and the narrative to someone else and say, you know what, if you build this with me, we'll make massive wealth. If you've been able to convince intelligent people to be a part of your founding team, these three things I think are most important that an investor would rationally try to examine and evaluate.
Great.
So we have another question. What is the perfect stage to get into a startup as an investor?
As soon as you can. I'm
As-
sorry.
Correct? Absolutely. As soon as you can, because your upside is higher, but your risk is also higher. So depending on your risk appetite, if you're not risky, like not risk taking at all, just don't get into the ecosystem. You love crazy risk, then yeah, just use the barbell strategy and put 10% of your wealth and just get in as early as possible, because the return will be higher, but the risk will be higher.
Great. So I think we have taken 20 extra minutes than the scheduled time, and thank you, Sarthak, for all the time. And I know there is more things brewing, so maybe we can cut short the event, or sorry, cut the event here, and probably you guys can discuss it with Sarthak over. And thank you, Sarthak, for the book.
Thank you.
And I think it has taken a lot of effort, and I know writing books is not a monetary benefit that anybody is looking for.
Correct.
So I know this comes from a genuine and a pure intention to give back to people like me and to everyone else. Thank you so much for the book. And one last piece of word that I want from you is, Sarthak, there are so many things that we all want to do, and there are so many things that probably you also want to do, but you do them, right? I know people, and I know myself, there is a list of things that I want to do, and there is something that's just a hesitation where we're not able to do it. And like the gentleman asked, was it frustrating to write a book and all those things? And this is a very qualitative question. How do you make sure you jump across that wall where I know there are things like discipline over motivation and whatnot. Instagram is full of things like that. What is your take when it comes to delivering things like this book? It's so tangible. It's not superficial. I'm sure making content online was easier than creating this book. So what is it that gives you the door into that wall where there is a hesitation?
Sure, I'll tell you. This is probably something I've followed so far in my life, and I'll give you very rudimentary examples for it. Which is, my one motivator in life is whatever I fear, I want to overcome in some way. And the rudimentary examples being something so simple as, I remember I started losing my hair like at a very early age. Back in 12th grade, like I remember writing my pre-board exams. I'm just writing the exam and hair is falling, and I'm like, what the hell? How will I study? And at a young age, you're so much more impressionable, and vanity plays such a big role in defining your own personality. I was like, oh shoot, I'm so young, will I ever get married? Will I look good? Will I look macho? Will I have girlfriends? And this happened, that happened, people will judge me and this and that. And at some point I was so frustrated, it was taking so much of my attention and time that I couldn't focus on it. And I was exploring how can I get a transplant and this and that. And I was like, what am I scared of? I'm scared of going bald. I just picked up a razor, shaved that thing off. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror for 6 months because I did not identify with the person I saw. But I'll tell you, 6 months later, I suddenly felt like so much more confident, because if say even 5% of my time daily was just going into looking at myself in the mirror and worrying about whether my hair is looking right or not, suddenly I wasn't bothering about it. I wake up in the morning and I look macho and I look like Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm like, I'm going to go seize the day. So that just pushing yourself to the point, okay, किस चीज से डरा है? I'll go bald, let's just shave that damn thing and get going with life. I think that attitude has probably pushed me. So I was scared of at one point people telling me, you've signed up for 4 courses, how are you going to do it? I'm like, I'll take it one step at a time and I'll bloody well do it. And I remember I was the editor back at my school magazine. I'll tell you, I used to hate writing so much that I'm not proud of this. One of my friends had written a piece somewhere because he used to enjoy writing. And as the editor, I had to submit a piece into the magazine. And I told him, you've written this is very good, ye mere ko de de, I'll put in my name and I'll publish it in the magazine. And I did that. And that guilt kind of stuck with me for so long that I fear writing so much that I couldn't even write something for a school magazine which was my baby, I was an editor of. And this one day I promised myself I need to overcome this fear. And I started writing a blog. I started this blog called My Life is a Jalebi, which was a humor blog, and I started writing every day, and I made a promise to myself that every month 2 posts will go up on this blog, come what may. I remember like 30th September, tax audit deadlines and ITR deadlines and all, and I haven't written those 2 pieces for the day. And I know I'm going to have a crazy day at work where I'll be working till 12 midnight. I would wake up at 4 in the morning to write whatever crap came into my mind because I was like, I have to meet that promise to myself. In 2015, I got the award for the best humor blog of the country, which I couldn't imagine because there was something I used to fear so much, and only in my attempt to, I'm going to overcome this damn fear. I kept doing it, came to a point where that happened and I couldn't imagine. So it's just that consistent effort, whatever you fear. If you think कि मोटा हो जाऊंगा, कुछ हो जाऊंगा, which is currently my fear. So I promise you next year 6-pack abs, I'll probably be on hoardings and shit. So I mean that's the thing. Like you just need to be like किस चीज का डर है? पापा नहीं मानेंगे, ये नहीं होएगा, वो नहीं होएगा. Just bloody go after it and do it. I think that kick will give you the confidence to go after the next bigger challenge and the next bigger challenge and the one after that.
So go head on.
Yeah.
Right. Go head on with whatever is it that's troubling you. And one takeaway also is don't care about the small things in life.
Yeah.
It's things that you think don't matter in the bigger picture of how you look at yourself. Right. And I think he looks he looks smarter than a lot of people around me, right, who consider them to be whatever they are. Great, thank you so much guys, and we have 24 hours and we can all order this book. It's a signed copy, and trust me, whether you're a founder, whether you're an investor, whether you are serving whoever you're serving, make sure that you have a copy at your home and you go through the book. And that's it. Thank you so much for logging in today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you Sarthak for being here.
Pleasure.